They came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Once more Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened, and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Jesus sent him home, saying, "Don't go into the village." Jesus and his disciples went on to the villages around Caesarea Philippi. On the way, he asked them, "Who do people say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "You are the Christ." Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again.
What's going on, fellowship? How we doing this morning? If you're at home, you probably heard a few people in the crowd. You're not going crazy. There are actually people out in the crowd. I've been talking to some people, and the online services have been great, but there's a lot of people that have just been like, man, I haven't been able to connect with the speaker. It's been a little bit difficult to do that. And thinking about that, I was like, man, it's really hard for the speaker to connect with the audience when there's no audience, and you record on a Thursday or Friday, and the people listen to it on a Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. And a lot of times I feel like I record, and it's like, I don't even know if people are going to hear it. So what I've decided to do is I've asked a couple of my friends. They are socially distanced. They had their mask coming in and their mask going out, and they are here listening to be part of an audience. But also it's important for you people at home to know that August 16th, that we are going to be meeting back again as a church, the same times, 9 and 10:45. But here's the deal. This is why we're announcing it so much. You have to register online for it. Due to the restrictions that we have, we just can't have everybody coming in. There's a limited number of people we can have. So I would say, looking at the registration this morning, I would go online and register as quickly as possible. But I just want to say that I'm excited for us to be able to meet again and to be able to one day ask the question, "Fellowship, how we doing?" and everyone give a round of applause. But you see, in life, there's a lot of questions that we ask that carry a lot of weight to them. And you see, a lot of times the question carries a lot of weight, not because the question is important, but because the answer carries a lot of weight with it too. You see, the first moment that I remember a question meaning a lot to me, I was in 10th grade. I just got done with practice. I went to my buddy's house. I was 15. He was 16. He could drive. He was cool because he could drive. And so I was at his house, and he said, "Bro, what do you want to do tonight?" I said, "Man, I'm tired. We've played, sports all week. We've had tests all week. I kind of just want to chill." And he goes, "Yeah, man, me too." A few minutes later, his mom walks in, and his mom says, "What do you boys got planned tonight?" And he says, "Well, we were thinking about going to Jason's house." And his mom looks at him, and she goes, naturally, "Who is Jason?" And I go, "Who is we?" Like, we just had this conversation that we were staying inside, and now all of a sudden we're going to Jason's house. And he explains who Jason was to his mom, and his mom gave the mom response and said, "Hey, I don't know Jason. I don't know his parents. I would prefer it if you guys stayed in tonight. Maybe we can order pizza, get some ice cream, watch a movie." And I'm like, "That sounds great." And he goes, "Yes, ma'am." She leaves. A few minutes later, my friend gets a phone call. And I can tell that he gets a phone call from a girl that he likes because he's high school flirting with her. The high school flirting where they mumble and they sound like they just woke up, like, "Hey, how you doing? Yeah, babe, that's with my boy." And I'm like, "Bro, why are you talking like you just woke up? Talk normally." He's like, "Shh," like kind of trying to push me away. And he then goes, "Yeah, don't worry, we'll be there." And I'm like, dude, again, you're throwing around Wii's like you own Nintendo or something. Like, what? Like, I don't want to go to Jason's house. He gets off the phone and he says, "Listen, here's the deal. I'm going to go downstairs. I'm going to tell my mom that we're going to go to McDonald's, But we're not going to go to McDonald's. We're actually going to go to Jason's house. And all these red flags are coming up in my head. I'm like, first of all, did you hear what your mom said? She said no. And if we get caught, I don't care what your mom's going to do to me. But if my parents find out, there's a world of hurt and suffering awaiting for me when I get home from my parents. But he says something to me that probably even to this day would work on me. He says this. He says, bro, don't be lame. And I was like, okay. First of all, me lame? Are you kidding me? And second of all, get the keys. We're going to Jason's house. So we go downstairs, lie to his mother. We start driving to Jason's house, and he is unloading what's about to be at this party. Very illegal things, not just illegal for people under the age of 21, which we definitely were, but illegal for everybody. And all these voices are continuing to go through my head. Like, Ben, you shouldn't do this. You should probably just unbuckle your seatbelt and roll out of the car. You'll go to the hospital, but at least you won't get killed by your parents, because that's where we're going to go. It's not just a bunch of pain and suffering awaiting for you at home. Your parents are literally going to kill you, and they're going to go to jail for the rest of their lives for murder. Do not do this. But there's also another voice going through my head, and the voice says, bro, don't be lame. And so I'm like, let's go party! And so we're trying to find this place, and we can't find it. It's in the middle of nowhere, but we see a bunch of cars turning down this driveway. Now, here's the backstory. You guys need to understand this. You don't accidentally get to this driveway. It is a long driveway, probably about a quarter of a mile long, and there's one house at the end of it. So you don't accidentally go to this driveway, and we're like, oh, it's this huge mansion. There's Jason's house. We pull up. We're about to go out to go to this party, which I am freaking out about, and I'm about to get out of the car, and I look in the side view mirror, and the entire Tampa Bay police force is flying down this driveway. This party is getting busted. And it looks like me and my buddy are leaving. And we are freaking out. I mean, it is like a movie. Cops are coming out of bushes. People are running in with assault rifles. And a cop comes up to the window. Comes up to the passenger side window, the window that I'm at, with a flashlight as bright as the surface of the sun. And we roll the window down. I look over at my friend and realize he's not going to be any help, because he is gripping the steering wheel as hard as he possibly can, and he is, listen to this, crying. And I look at him and I go, who's lame now? And police officer pulls up, and I kind of give the cliche remark, and I say, what seems to be the problem, officer? Which he probably should have just tased me for asking that question, but he didn't. But he asked me a question. And the way that I would answer this question would probably dictate not just my night, but the next few months and years of my life, not just with the law, but with my parents. This question carried a lot of weight. And so what I'm going to do before I go into what I did and how I answered the police officer, I'm going to save that for the end. So we're going to take a pause from that story right now. But there are questions in life that carry a lot of weight. Not just because of the question, but because of the answer to that question. You know, for most of you are married, have been married, and in order to get married, unless it's an arranged marriage, somebody asked someone to marry them, and someone was asked by somebody to marry them, and that answer carried a lot of weight. If you said yes, you're saying, I'm committing to thick and thin being with you, to waking up next to you every single morning. And if you say no, there's a lot of weight that carries to that too, because most people don't say, yeah, let's just continue dating after you told me no, you don't want to marry me. A lot of times that relationship will just end. It carries a lot of weight. And you see, there's a question that we just read in Mark chapter 8. And there's a question that Jesus asked his disciples in verses 27 through 30. That's the most important question any of us will ever have to answer. It's an answer that will not only decide our future, but it will decide our eternity. And the question is this: who do you say Jesus is? Who do you say Jesus is? And see, we see that question in Mark 8, 27 through 30. But that's not a new thought. This isn't just a random thought by Jesus as he's trying to randomly bring up this question. We see in the healing of a blind man in the beginning in verses 27 through 26. And also last week with the feeding of the 4,000. And then when Jesus warns about the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod, what Jesus is doing with all of these miracles is Jesus is setting up this really important question. It's not random. You see, last week, Tyler talked about the feeding of the 5,000. And so if you didn't listen to that, I would really highly recommend you listen to that. I mean, there's not a lot of sermons that you can knock out of the park. And I mean, he knocked it out of the park. But that's the thing with the Bible. We have to understand the context of it. There's not just a bunch of random stories, but stories work off of each other. And that's exactly what's happening here in Mark chapter 8. Jesus asked an important question, but before we get to that question, we have to see the context. So what we're going to do is point by point, we're going to be peeling back the layers of this onion. And we're going to continually go back to these different miracles. And the first point, there'll be one layer. The second point, there's going to be another layer. And we're going to keep going back to the same things, but seeing the implications of what these miracles have to the most important question that Jesus will ever ask. And you see, the thing that we have to understand first is that there's purpose to Jesus' miracles. You see, the purpose of Jesus' miracles isn't just to show us the really cool things that he can do, isn't just to show that he can heal a blind man, that he can feed 4,000 people, but the purpose of Jesus' miracles isn't just to show what he can do. The purpose of Jesus' miracles is to show who he is. He's trying to show the disciples, he's trying to show the people who are following him who he really is. And so what we're going to be doing this morning, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to have 3 points. But the point, since Jesus asked a question, the points are going to be questions too. To help us dive into the answering the question of who we believe Jesus is. And so this is my challenge to the people in here in the room, but also to the people at home. At home, you can pause it. People in the crowd, you can't pause me, unfortunately. What I want you to do is that as we ask this question, maybe take a pause and write the question down. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be this Christian Jesus answer that comes into your mind. But what I want us to do is I want us to actually be thinking about this question as we're diving into each point and really asking yourself, is that really me? So that's the challenge. So the first point this morning, the first question that we are going to ask is, do you see Jesus for what he can do for you or for who he is? Do you see Jesus for what he can do for you, or do you see Jesus for who he is? You see, last week, Tyler talked about the feeding of the 5,000. And so we have to understand that, yes, Jesus fed the 4,000 people. He had very little to work with, and he fed 4,000 people. But the purpose of that miracle wasn't just to go, hey, guys, watch this. This is cool. Again, purpose of miracles is to show who Jesus is. What Jesus is showing these people, what Jesus is trying to teach his disciples and us, is that, yes, I can feed the physically hungry, but I can also feed the spiritually hungry. What he's trying to show them is, remember, he didn't even have enough food with both the 5,000 and the 4,000 people that he fed. He didn't even have enough food to feed himself and his disciples, let alone the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are following him. But what happens at the end of the 5,000, how many basketfuls did they have left over? 12. At the end of the 4,000, how many basketfuls did they have left over? 7. They had more. They ended up with more than they started with. What Jesus is trying to show here about his character, about who he is he's trying to show that there is no need that is too great for me to fulfill. He's not just showing us, he's not just showing his disciples that he is enough. What he's doing is he's showing us that he is more than enough. Remember, purpose of miracles is to show who Jesus is. Are we focusing on what Jesus can do for us, or are we learning more of who he is as he provides for us? Then comes the blind man in verse 22. Again, purpose of miracles to show who Jesus is. He's not just showing that he can physically heal the blind. What he is showing is he's not just here to heal the physically blind, but he's here to open the eyes of our hearts and heal us from our spiritual blindness. Again, I've said it so many times, I need to keep saying it. The purpose of miracles is what? Just to show who Jesus is. And so we have to ask ourselves, do we see Jesus for what he can do for us, or do we see Jesus for who he really is? And so there's a lot in this passage. Mark chapter 8, if you open up commentaries, it's probably the thickest part of it because there's so many implications, there's so many things that scholars have seen. But we have to understand that this healing of the blind man isn't just this random story. It seems pretty random in there, but it's not. It actually has everything to do with what Tyler talked about last week. And what happens is after they feed the 4,000 people, as Tyler did such a great job, the disciples just watched Jesus feed 4,000 people, and now they're in a boat and they have one loaf of bread, and they look at each other like, what are we going to do? We're going to starve to death. And Jesus is probably like, really, God? Like, these are the people that you hooked me up with? They're imbeciles. But he doesn't say that. And in fact, it seems like his answer to the disciples is pretty random. He says in chapter 8, verse 15, after the disciples just saw him feed the 4,000 people, now they have a loaf of bread and they're like, what are we going to do? Jesus looks at them and he says, and he cautioned them. He cautioned the disciples saying, watch out, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Okay, that seems pretty random. It's like one of those things where you're talking to somebody and somebody says something to you that's so random and you actually have to question, like, are you actually talking to me or are you talking to somebody else? But you see, it's not random at all. What he's trying to say is he's like, hey guys, like Herod and the Pharisees and you guys have been with me. You guys have seen me do amazing miracles. You guys have seen me do amazing things. But hey, Herod and the Pharisees, they've missed it. You see, remember, the purpose of miracles is to show who Jesus is. They see Jesus do miracles, and the Pharisees think that he's getting his power from Satan, which seems really airtight. I don't know how that argument didn't stick, but they missed it. Herod, if we remember a few weeks ago and talking about Herod and Herodias and a really weird story that was, Herod thought that Jesus was John the Baptist. You see, these people, Herod and the Pharisees, have been around Jesus and his miracles, but they've continued time and time again to miss it. And now Jesus is looking at his disciples and he's saying, beware. He says, beware that their unbelief doesn't seep into you. Don't allow their unbelief of who I really am seep into who you are. Don't be around me and surround yourself with me, but miss who I am. And so the second question that Jesus is asking, and we're going to be asking ourselves this morning or this afternoon or whenever it is do you surround yourself with Jesus but miss who he is? Do you surround yourself with Jesus but miss who he is? And so this is the backdrop of the healing of the blind man. And I know we just read it, but I'd love to read it again because there's a lot in here. We're just going to read it again, starting in verse 22. And they came to Bethesda, and some people brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. And he took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. And when he had spit on his eyes and laid his hands on him, he asked him, do you see anything? And he looked up and said, I see people, but they look like trees walking. Then Jesus laid his hands on his eyes again, and he opened his eyes. His sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. And he sent him to his home, saying, do not even enter this village. And so there's different ideas. This is the only miracle in the entire New Testament. That's the only thing I checked out. But I'm pretty sure this is the only miracle in the entire Bible that has a partial healing. Meaning Jesus only healed him partially. And there's different reasons as to why this is. Some commentators say it's because of the faith of the man. If you see in verse 22, it says that the people brought this man to Jesus, and then the people begged Jesus to heal him. It never said that the blind man did. And so because of verse 24, it says that when Jesus asked him if he could see anything, he said, well, I see people, but they look like trees. Insinuating that he has seen people and that he has seen trees. Basically, insinuating that this man wasn't blind from birth, but he was blind because of some sort of physical disease. And so we can assume because of that, this man has been to doctor after doctor, healer after healer, teacher after teacher, and he's finally getting to the point of like, hey, I am unhealable. So when they tell him about Jesus, he's like, Jesus can't heal me. And even if he could, why would he even care about me? And so the faith of this man, maybe why Jesus did it partially, is that he didn't have enough faith. And so what he did is that he healed him a little bit, his faith grew, and then he healed him fully. Some commentators believe it's because of fear, that this man was overwhelmed, which would explain why Jesus brought him out of the city so he wouldn't be anxious and overwhelmed. And he did it slowly so that when it fully came to completion, he wouldn't be overwhelmed. Some people believe that because of this physical ailment, that he was in a lot of pain. And so Jesus, with his spit, kind of soothed the pain a little bit, and then the second one cleared his sight. But I don't think that's exactly why Jesus did it. Again, with the backdrop of what's going on with the feeding of the 4,000 and the leaven of Herod, and then the question that Jesus is about to answer, these are my thoughts. Jesus partially healed him. What if Jesus healed him just enough so that he could see the person that stood right in front of him that just healed him? Just think about it. If Jesus is that close, if he is touching this man's eyes, who would be the first person that this man would see? Jesus. And so maybe Jesus is asking him, can you see anything? Not because he's like, did it work? Like, did I actually heal you? Did I give you enough of my magic juju? Or what if he asks him, can you see anything? Not about physical sight at all, but what if he's asking him is, do you see who I am? But what did this man do? He looked around, he didn't look at Jesus. He looked directly past him at the people walking in the city, and he says, man, I see a bunch of people walking around. And what he doesn't see, he doesn't say, I see my Savior, I see the Son of God, I see my Messiah, because if he saw that, he wouldn't care if there's a bunch of trees walking around. He wouldn't care if literally the world is on fire because the one who has won his heart is standing right in front of him, but he doesn't. He looks directly past him. And so Jesus, in his compassion, what he does is he heals the man completely. Using this as another teaching moment to his disciples, the Pharisees and Herod have seen me and missed it. The people I heal constantly are missing it. Are you? You just watched me feed 4,000 people. Now you're sitting here in this boat and you're like, what are we going to do about food? Because if you really knew who I was, then you would not be asking that question. And so what that is the backdrop leading into this question in verses 27 through 30. And 27 through 30 say this: And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way he asked his disciples, who do people say that I am? And they told him, John the Baptist, and others say Elijah, and others one of the prophets. And he asked them, here it is, but who do you say that I am? Homeboy Peter answered him, you are the Christ. And he strictly charged them to tell no one about him. So the disciples say that some people have seen Jesus as some of these honestly celebrities of the faith. I mean, if I got compared to John the Baptist and Elijah and the prophets, I'd be like, sweet, like that's like being compared to Hall of Famers in sports. You're like, that's exciting. But what's the problem with this? The problem with this is that these people are significant, but Jesus is more than just significant. He should be supreme. Significant means maybe in your top 5. Supreme means you're number 1 and you're only one. So this is the third question that I want us to wrestle through right now as we're going to go to the question that we really need to be answering as we're trying to help us get to that point is this: do you see Jesus as significant, or do you see Jesus as supreme? Is he in your top 5 picks if there was fantasy football, or is he your number 1? And so the question is this: why is it so important to get who Jesus is right? But here's the problem with what they have done. Here's the problem with who they have compared him to. They have compared him to these prophets. And the question is, what's a prophet? A prophet is somebody who is the voice box to people. It's someone who represents God to a certain people. And so what they're saying is that, hey, this Jesus guy is significant. This Jesus guy is important. That's what all of these people are saying when Jesus says, who do people say that I am? They're saying, Jesus, they say that you are significant. But the problem is that Jesus isn't just merely representing God. Jesus is God. The prophets were significant, but at the end of the Old Testament, you're not reading the end of the Old Testament going, wow, this is exciting. This is really good. No, you read the end of the Old Testament and you're like, something's got to change. Because God continually rescues his people, continually takes his people out of bondage, and time again, they go back to their old ways. They do what's right in their own eyes. You read the end of the Old Testament and you're like, something has to be better than this. And the great thing about Jesus is that he's not just the continuation of the Old Testament. He's the something better that the Old Testament alludes to. So all of this is leading, and as we're trying to decide, is Jesus significant or is Jesus supreme, the question that we have to be wrestling with is this. Do you believe in the Jesus who lived, or do you believe in the Jesus who lives? Do you believe in this historical figure of Jesus and you worship this historical figure as significant? Or do you believe in the Jesus who lives and have a relationship with him right now and he is reigning supreme? And so the question is this: do you believe in the Jesus who lived, who taught many things, who did really cool miracles, who honestly, the calendar is split based off of this man. If there is any person that is significant in the history of the world, it's the person that changed the calendar. Like, you could believe in Jesus or you could believe in not Jesus. When you sign your checks, you are believing in Jesus because you are saying that Jesus existed because the calendar changed when he was born. Do you believe in that Jesus? Do you believe that he is the creator of Christianity as this historical figure? Or do you believe in the Jesus who lives, who, yes, was incredibly significant to the history of the world, yes, who did miracles, yes, who taught, yes, who changed the calendar, yes, who started Christianity, but it doesn't just stop there? Do you believe that he is the Son of God, who lived the life we were supposed to live, who died the death that we were supposed to die, taking on the punishment and wrath of God that we deserved through his death on the cross? But it doesn't even stop there. Do you believe that he rose again? Because here's the deal. All these significant people that they were comparing Jesus to, they died and they stayed dead. Why? Because they had sin. Do you believe in the Jesus who lives, or do you believe in the Jesus who lives? Because he's not just significant, he is supreme. He shouldn't just sit at a significant seat at the table. He should sit on the throne of our lives. And so here's the definitions of significant and supreme. Significant is sufficiently great or important to be worthy of attention. Supreme is superior to all others. And this is why it's so important that we get who Jesus is right. A significant person could not have taken on the sin of the world. Significant people have sin. These prophets, Elijah, John the Baptist, and some other versions it says Jeremiah, all of those people had sin. And since they had sin in their lives, they could not have taken the weight of the sin of the world on their shoulders because they're significant, but they're human. This is why it's so important that we get who Jesus is right, because if we believe that he is significant, we will die and we will go to hell. The only way Jesus could have taken on the sin of the world is one way and one way only, and that's if he is God. Not just a historical figure, but a figure that lives today, that we have a relationship with today. Who do you say Jesus is? And if you're watching this, if you're here in this room, it's because you've decided to surround yourself with Jesus, unless you're watching this against your will, which if you are, welcome, we're glad you're here. But you're surrounding yourself with Jesus. Are you seeing Jesus work in other people's lives? Are you seeing Jesus work in your life but missing who he is? You see, the answer to this one question will dictate how you live your life right now. See, I guarantee you that if Jesus reigns supreme in your life, then it's going to change more than just your Sunday mornings. It's going to change the way you do your finances. It's going to change the way you work. It's going to change the way you love people. It's going to change the way you love your family. It's going to change every single aspect about you. Because who we say Jesus is determines who we are. How we answer this question matters. There are questions in life that carry a lot of weight because of the answers that we have to give to those questions. Bringing me back to my rebel days when I was 15. Cops are storming the house. My friend's crying. I want to cry too, but we can't have two people crying. Cop looks at me and he asks me the question that carries a lot of weight. What are you boys doing here tonight? And I'm not proud of it. I lied. He said, officer, we were trying to find this major road. We got lost. My friend's phone died. He's the only one that has GPS. We saw a bunch of cars going down this driveway and we realized that there was a dead end. We were just going to do a U-turn. We just got here. We don't even know what's going on, which was a lie. We were going to that party for a reason. And the cop bought it. He's like, oh, okay, yeah, Lumsden Road. You just got to do a U-turn here. He told us how to get to Lumsden Road. Honestly, he may have not bought it. He probably just didn't want to have to deal with the 16 and 15-year-old when they were real criminals on the inside of that house, probably. But it carried a lot of weight. You see, if I would have answered that question wrongly, like I could have been thrown into jail. They could have thought that I was leaving the party, that I was being a part of what was going on in that party, and I guarantee you my parents would not have bailed me out of jail. I would have sat in prison for a long time. But here's the deal about the question that Jesus asked his disciples, and we have to answer for ourselves. If we get this thing wrong, we're not just going to be thrown into prison for a year. If we get this thing wrong, it determines our eternity. Because not only who we say Jesus is determines who we are, but who we say Jesus is determines our eternity. This isn't a question that we can get wrong. There are questions that carry a lot of weight, not because of the question, but because of the answer that follows. So here are the questions we need to be asking ourselves now. Do we believe that Jesus is significant or supreme? Do we surround ourselves with Jesus but miss who he is? Do we see Jesus for what he can do for us, or do we see Jesus for who he is? And I'll end our time together with the question that Jesus ended with his disciples with. Who do you say Jesus is? Have a great week of worship fellowship.
In my longing, in my waiting, will your presence be enough? When I'm fearful, when I'm doubting, will I have the strength to trust? You're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. In my grieving, in my sorrow, will your goodness steady me? When I'm blinded, when I'm hopeless, will I have the eyes together, together. You're the one who holds all things together, together, together. You're the one who holds all things together. In my serving, when I'm hidden, will I trust the Father's sheep? When you call me, will I listen? Will I follow where you lead? Will I follow where you lead? Where you lead. You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together. You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds all things together, together, together. You're the one who holds all things together, together, together. You're the one who holds all things together. You're the first, you're the last, you're forever. You're the one who brings spring out of winter. You're the promise and you are the keeper. You're the one who holds